All right, today I was going to just take a few moments to announce charges in a case that's been actively investigated for about the last 4 months. Today my office charged Elijah Henderson with 4 counts of driving while intoxicated under the theory that while he was operating a motor vehicle under the influence of marijuana and acted with criminal negligence in causing the tragic death of 4 individuals in a minivan. Those 4 individuals were 2 sets of mother-daughters. They were on their way from Louisville to Kansas City for a volleyball tournament, and their lives were tragically taken on Valentine's Day of this year. The charges are Class B felonies, which means that if convicted, he could serve up to 15 years in the penitentiary. Obviously, these are just allegations at this point. One of the things I'd like to do also is commend the Highway Patrol. They put a ton of effort into the accident reconstruction, interviewing witnesses, a very thorough investigation. We would have had the ability to announce charges sooner had it not been for some slowdowns with the pandemic, but they should be applauded for their thorough efforts in this case. It was mentioned in the PC statement, so I can mention that to you. Mr. Moore is currently on probation for a drug offense here in St. Charles County, and he also has a prior DWI here in St. Charles County as well. So it's a combination of the intoxication by way of marijuana as well as his recklessness. Specifically, what he is alleged to have done is reach across a large Ford F-250 passenger compartment to manually roll up the passenger side window. That's how he lost control of the steering wheel.
Can we take that from the top that he's accused of?
Sure.
Please, thank you.
The specific allegation is that he was operating a motor vehicle while under the influence of marijuana, and in doing so, he reached across the passenger compartment to the passenger side door, which had a manual window, and he attempted to roll the window up, and he stretched so far that his hand lost control of the wheel and caused the wheel to dramatically pull to the left, crossing over to the westbound lanes of traffic and striking 2 vehicles. Well, actually, he struck the van in which the victims were passengers, and then a 3rd vehicle was involved in the aftermath of that collision. That driver was fortunately unhurt. I think that's about all. Do you guys have any questions?
Was marijuana found in his system?
Yeah, so he had the metabolites that showed that the marijuana consumption was probably hours before the accident, probably that morning. Officers conducted a search warrant of his personal vehicle. This was a work vehicle, but his personal vehicle showed marijuana residue and paraphernalia that appeared to have been freshly used just from that morning.
Can you explain the reason for the delay between the crash?
Say the last part, I'm sorry?
Sorry, the reason for the delay?
Oh, sure.
Between the crash and the tornado.
So when you've got a traffic fatality like this, the Highway Patrol does an accident reconstruction. It's a very time-consuming process. There are a lot of measurements that have to be taken, a lot of science goes into it, a lot of witness interviews. Those things just take time, especially with the pandemic. It hit kind of right when this investigation was in full throttle. That slowed it down. But I can tell you, it's not uncommon at all for an accident reconstruction report to take several months. So, under the circumstances, they were really quick.
What's the status of the charges against Detective Joshua Smith?
I can address that. I'll address that at a future time. Yeah.
May I ask, how severe was his marijuana impairment? We're all familiar with blood alcohol level because that's in numbers, but how severe was the pot impairment, and what role do you think it played in the accident?
Well, it was severe enough that it would constitute impairment, and we know that by the metabolites that were present in his blood system. We know that it was beyond the level of impairment. Now, to what extent, I can't answer that here today, but I do believe that if you've got impairment, that complicates any sort of driving function, especially when you take a risky maneuver of trying to reach across while you're driving 70 miles an hour and manually roll up a window.
And so, at the time, was he tested for marijuana? Did he have to walk a line? I don't know how, or glow, or how did they determine that this was the problem?
He was injured in the accident, so he was taken to the hospital. And at the hospital, he voluntarily consented to seizure of his blood. So his blood was tested a few days after that.
Even though it was in his blood, did he actually admit to smoking marijuana that morning, the previous evening?
He acknowledged smoking marijuana the day before.
The time discrepancy between him admitting he smoked it the day before and your science saying that it was likely that morning, is there a margin of error where he could have been telling the truth and the science is off, or do you think that he's lying?
Our science is pretty clear that the metabolites, there were 3 metabolites that were found in his blood at the time of the test, and that means that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, he'd consumed the marijuana within a few hours of when his blood was seized.
What lesson does this case have for a lot of people who are new to marijuana or coming back to it, and they might think it's okay now because it's allowed more across the country? What does this show you about the dangers of marijuana and driving?
Yeah, it's a real thing. I mean, I think especially younger folks. You know, I have high school students. My kids are high school students, and one thing I try to reiterate with them: it's not just drinking and driving. It's any sort of impairment. Even legal drugs can result in impairment. So you hate to have something like this serve as a lesson to everybody, but hopefully people just look at this and can understand that it's a serious deal.
Can we talk a little bit about what this lady wanted to talk about, just because there is going to be a protest here. The last time we spoke about this, you were still trying to contact the 3 Florissant officers who had been in the car, and the people who ran away, the 3 who ran away, and then after getting them, you could talk to the officers. Can you just give us sort of a mid-process update? Where does the investigation stand?
Sure. So the investigation's still ongoing. I think it's probably going to be wrapped up here, hopefully sometime this week. I spoke with the lead detective this morning. He had a list of folks that he was still trying to interview, so we want to make sure he can get that done. And once that's finished, we'll be in a position to make a decision moving forward. So again, I hope it's before the end of this week.
Have they talked to the main victim and the driver, the police driver?
They have.
Okay. So it's just the ancillary people that actually witnesses.
Right.
And by the end of this week, you could have something?
I expect it, yes. My hope is to have something to announce this week.
And will this go through a grand jury, or will you make the decision on your own?
This will be just our own decision initially. We'll just go from there.
Okay. Does anybody have anything? Because I had one other case about. Have you heard anything about? There is a man in his 20s at the jail across the street who was recently admitted, and his grandfather had died of COVID-19. There was an online petition to try to have somebody look at that. Maybe that's not your.
No, I know there was somebody in court whose family member tested positive for COVID-19
Okay.
when defended, but I don't know anything about
Put you on
that.
the spot. I thought, well, maybe that's a question for the jail administrator.
Probably.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
That's
All right.
it.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Yep.